Spring is here, and we are seeing a huge influx of people trying to cross into the United States from Mexico. Well, everyone except for this gringo that's trying to get the hell out of here as fast as he can. And it was pretty funny. I met Jeff here in Arizona, literally with Trump announcing that he may soon close down the U.S.-Mexican border, with Jeff, of course, freaking out. I'm going to let him talk about that in just a little bit. But in this specific video, we are going to be talking about the topic of immigration from an apolitical, anarchistic point of view, from a political, realistic point of view, and also an economic point of view, because, Jeff, you're mostly a kind of financial, big money guy, a crypto guy. You've been on Fox Business a lot of times. You have a newsletter, a financial one, which, of course, more people will be able to find out in the description below. But first of all, let's talk about this immigration thing, because you weren't really happy finding out that you may not be able to leave America, which of course is the opposite problem that a lot of people are having, with of course a huge influx, a larger influx, with a lot of Border Patrol scrambling to assess the situation and take care of it. So just tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, sort of my biggest nightmare is to be caught in the U.S. and then not to be able to get back to the land of the free in Mexico. So it's a little disturbing. But then at the same time, I remembered it was Donald Trump who said it. And he says a lot of things, and he doesn't really follow through on many of them. But very interesting time, and hopefully I can get out before if he does something.
Well, this is what's interesting, because there's been such a huge influx. I mean, there's horrifying pictures coming out of people under highways, being put in parking lots. There's even local churches and community organizers that do help out the people who are saying that on average they dealt with 200 to 300 people. Now they're saying they're dealing with 800 people per day. And of course, the situation is getting to such a complexity that Trump is just openly saying, hey, Mexico, do something or we're going to shut down the border. But again, the problem is not just left and right, as we talked about earlier. It's not just black and white. It's not just you're for immigration or you're not for immigration. How do you handle this kind of scenario from an anarchistic point of view, but also a realistic point of view? Because again, there's a lot to unravel here with this bigger issue that, of course, is just ultimately hurting people and dividing and conquering them. But how do you deal with this issue, especially from an anarchistic, no government point of view?
Well, I have to point out all these problems are caused by government. It's clear that without governments, if we had a truly free market, we wouldn't have many of these problems. Many of them are caused by government. You look, even the Honduran government, for example, they're creating so many problems in their own country that a lot of people want to get out of there. And where do they want to go? Well, there's a large, giant, pretty much the biggest government in the world here in the U.S. that has a very socialist, has welfare, has public schools, all those sort of things. So it's fairly natural in that sort of situation for people to want to go from one place to another. But again, it is all caused by government. In a free market, you really wouldn't see that. If there wasn't socialism here in the U.S. and if there wasn't freebies for nearly everything, a lot of people would have a lot less incentive to want to come here.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because just covering the situation on the ground in Tijuana during, of course, when the media was paying attention to it. Now we're seeing them pay more attention to it because of course, the bombastic Trump comments, because of this huge political fight for the border wall. But the situation was really absolutely crazy. The amount of people suffering from this, being taken advantage of, is just absolutely insane. And as you were talking about, and as I saw on the ground, people are just being sent up here saying, hey, there's free jobs up there. There's free opportunities. Come and get them. You'll be able to walk in, right in through. And a lot of people I talk to, especially from a lot of the countries that Trump just cut foreign aid to, just openly were like, oh yeah, I'm here to work. I'm here most of them didn't even know what asylum was. Now, a lot of the people crossing into the borders in the hundreds of thousands, in the millions, are saying, yes, we want asylum. The system is being overburdened. And obviously, how do you think this is going to, pan out financially? Because on one aspect, it'll be interesting to get your take on the kind of social welfare aspect of it, because states like California and New York are ultimately almost close to going bankrupt. The United States is also bankrupt $22 trillion now. But financially, what would happen if the border was closed between Mexico and the United States?
No one knows, but that would be probably the biggest event, sort of on a global economic level, in probably decades. These are two major trading partners. The amount of trade happening between the two countries is absolutely massive. When I first heard it, I was pretty shocked. Like, if they actually does, I don't think that they will. But if they do, it will have massive repercussions. You'd have millions of job losses on both sides of the border. You'd have a major economic recession or depression on both sides of the border. It would cause massive amounts of chaos. And if I personally can't get back to Mexico, I'm going to become a terrorist here in the U.S.
Well, that's a strong word. I think I'm going to see you here in Arizona crossing back into the United States. I don't think that's a terroristic activity, but yeah, you shouldn't say that. No, no, no.
I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I would not be pleased if I can't get back into Mexico where my wife and kids are. This is the amount of disruption that could be caused, just massive amounts. There really should not be this level of deterring people from going where they want to go, and that's what they're talking about here. And really, what this a lot of this is contrived, in my opinion. You see a lot of these entourages coming up, and we hear about how they're getting some freebies down there to come up to the U.S. And I think it's really to get people into a fear-based sort of a situation where they are actually demanding less freedom, and they're saying, "Hey, shut us down, put a wall around us, make it so we can't come in and out easily," and that's all by design, in my opinion.
Yeah, it also not only creates more government, but also creates a divide and conquer kind of situation where people are not liking each other, hating each other because of these lines, because of also cultural things, because of also these two kind of different lands being jammed in together, with of course the pure benefit of ultimately, let's just be honest here, the globalist. Because when you import cheap labor, you of course have cheaper labor in the market. If you have an abundance of something, the value of it will naturally go down. If you have an abundance of workers, obviously this is going to have a detrimental effect, not only on the people coming here who are being forced into pretty much slave labor, pretty much working underneath the books without any kind of protection or anything else, which some people would even call exploitation. But at the same time, the other person working, like an average American living here, is like, oh, we don't need to pay him as much, because again, that economic value is also a big aspect here, and that's not really talked about in the media. It's either you're for immigration or not immigration. Again, the issue is so far more complex. But I would even question, again, I disavow your other statement that you just made, but I would even question the possibility of this, because Trump has been pretty kind of bombastic, not only with his words. I mean, that's always been the case with him, but now it's kind of also with his actions. And he has been not only emboldened politically after the big Russian collusion thing came out as a lie, which we've been calling out from the very beginning, but he's been also saying a lot of and doing a lot of things with Golan Heights, with bombing Syria, moving the embassy in Jerusalem, and actually committing acts that have surprised a lot of people, because people said he would never do such things, and he is. So what's your kind of take of this Trump presidency that's been unfolding? And again, I find it incredibly difficult to document, because on one hand, he calls himself a nationalist and a globalist at the same time, creating a very confusing, paradoxical situation to break down politically, because it's not just black and white. But what do you make of it? Do you see it in black and white?
Well, nothing in this world is black and white, that's for sure. But to me, it's fairly obvious what's going on. This has been going on for decades now in the U.S. They put in someone extremely left in, and then they put in someone extremely right afterwards, and then half the country gets all happy, the other half gets all unhappy. They put in Obama, all the right people get mad. Then they put in before that was Bush. Then they put in Trump, and then all the right people are happy. But nothing's really changed. They're still at war all over the world. The U.S. troops are still all over the world. They're still going to massive amounts of debt. And I remember Donald Trump saying in the presidential primaries, or whatever they call them, that he was going to balance the budget and he was going to reduce the debt to zero. He said it was just a matter of pennies here and pennies there. It's had the biggest deficits now under Trump. Every month, actually, it gets bigger and bigger. And you actually can't stop it. The U.S. government's bankrupt. In fact, a lot of what we're talking about here will be almost irrelevant in a few years, because we're going to see all these governments collapse. We're going to see major fiat currencies going into hyperinflation. All of these problems that people are worried about today we'll have much bigger problems to deal with. But really, Trump hasn't changed much. I remember he said he was going to get out of Syria. That has not happened. He even talked about possibly restricting the Federal Reserve or getting rid of the Federal Reserve. That has not happened. He's talked about so many things, a wall on the Mexican border, obviously. But at the end of the day, there really hasn't been that many changes. It's all sort of smoke and mirror changes. It's just who's talking in front of the camera has changed, but the actual policies have not changed.
Yeah, and it's also interesting that there's a lot of kind of nuances to a lot of this, with also a lot of people from Latin America moving back to their countries away from the United States. And also people like you, people who are immigrating down to, of course, Mexico, and finding a new life there and finding it a lot different here. Because I even had this conversation with a friend last night, and we were talking, and I'm like, here you have permits, you have regulations, you have all these licenses. In Mexico, you just give someone $5 and you can do what you want. And it brings in a kind of paradox of which system is best for you or right for you, or which one is more freer. But again, there's so many other kind of nuance points. Anything else you want to say about just kind of the bigger perspective of what you see there on the ground? Because you're in Mexico, you live there, and what your kind of experience is with this kind of overall political situation that's unfolding.
Well, I would say it's really a lot of propaganda that the U.S. is being flooded with Mexicans. By statistical numbers, it really looks like more Mexicans have left the U.S. every year than gone to the U.S. for the last 10 years. And when I talk to a lot of people down in Mexico, they say, well, there's two reasons. There's a lot less free up there, and the economy isn't that great up there. It's actually been improving a lot in Mexico. So a lot of that propaganda that the U.S. is being flooded by Mexicans is quite untrue. Now, of course, Hondurans and other people, that's a little bit different. But then you also look at the other angle. There's literally millions of undocumented illegal alien Americans in Mexico, and it's actually become an issue in Mexico a little bit, which is kind of funny. But it's a lot. Most people don't fully realize what's really going on here. It's not as big of a deal with this massive influx of immigration. It's mostly been propped up by the media, of course. As we know, the media never gives us the real information. But down in Mexico, things are really going quite well. It's been improving economically now for years. It's a beautiful place to live. It's very safe in general. There's a few areas you don't want to go to, but there's a few areas in Chicago you don't want to go to either. But we'll see what happens. It's definitely interesting. We'll see what happens. I just think that a lot of this is sort of contrived, and the real goal of it is to, at the end of the day, get people scared enough to actually want a one world government. That's the end goal of it all, and to create enough chaos through it all that people actually beg for it.
Yep, and to give up your authority and your sovereignty as a free human being to live life and not be controlled, taxed, and regulated and just extorted out of your wealth. So if you want more information about that, definitely check out Jeff Berwick, his YouTube channel, and his newsletter will be in the description below. If you use the promo code WRC, I think you get a 10% discount as a WeAreChange viewer. So definitely check that out. Jeff, you've been doing a lot of crazy, incredible work. We've been in so many different places. Just check out WeAreChange Somalia, WeAreChange Venezuela. You'll see this guy there with me. Long-term, one of my best friends out here. So stay tuned for a lot more adventures here on WeAreChange. Subscribe. Stay tuned for a lot more.